The 2025 New York City Marathon was a beautiful race. Now, I'm a native New Yorker. I was born and raised in New York State, and I specifically lived and worked in New York City for almost 25 years. The New York City Marathon is always going to be my home race. Even though I've moved away from New York City and I no longer live there, it is always going to be that race I pay attention to, and it's always going to be the top world major for me. It's a unique race that is really a point-to-point race where you go through the entire city. You literally go from one end of New York City to the other end of New York City. You hit most of the hot spots that most people know of New York City. And it just is a gorgeous race. Now, it is a runner's race for a couple reasons. It's the last world major of the world major marathon season, so the big brands typically don't bring a lot of shoes, big launch events or anything to this race, so you can really focus on the racers. Secondly, and I know this as someone who was a New York Roadrunners member for many years, I've participated in many of their events, including the New York City Marathon. The New York City Marathon is a New Balance race. And New Balance is very, very aggressive about policing that sponsorship to the point where they push all other brands to really the fringes of the weekend. So I think a lot of other brands just don't even bother trying to battle that battle because it's been going on for quite some time. So you get a race that you can really focus on the racers, and that's really quite special as far as world majors go. And we saw some great racing this year across the entire field, both the men's and women's side, through the entire course. You saw those picturesque New York City moments, but specifically on the men's side, that ending was just really quite impressive. Kipruto and Mutiso's battle at the end, that sort of back and forth they had, was really incredible to watch, specifically because the last, I would say, 500 meters of the New York City Marathon is basically uphill. The finish line is on the top of a little tiny hill. I've run that hill many, many times, both directions, and it's not a major hill, but it is one that will catch you if you're not prepared for it. It doesn't look like that on TV, but it is definitely a hill. So to see Kipruto and Mutiso kind of going back and forth on that, and really that photo finish was really quite incredible. So congratulations to Kipruto. And then on the women's side, Obiri and Lokedi's race there was actually quite impressive. The finish on 59th Street was also quite special to watch. Now 59th Street also is uphill going to the entrance of the park. Again, not major, but it is a long hill and it's steeper than you would think it was. So to see Obiri kind of kick away from Lokedi on that is always impressive. To see those two go head to head in New York City is really great to watch. So again, congratulations to Kipruto and Obiri for their victories. Again, I don't want to take anything away from the athletes here, but I talk about shoes on this channel. And even though I said there wasn't a lot of shoe stuff to talk about, there are a couple things that are worth mentioning. And starting with Adidas, because they were really dominant this weekend, there were two big sweeps at this year's New York City Marathon. The first was Kenya dominating all 6 of the top podium spots for both the men's and women's field, and then Adidas dominating the top 3 spots on the men's field and number 3 on the women's side. Adidas had a really good weekend. But what was really interesting was it was only really these two shoes, the Evo 2 and the Adios Pro 4. I looked across the field and I didn't really see any Evo 1s in the field. Now it's hard to tell with the white Adios Pro 4 and the Evo. It's from far away shots, it's really hard to distinguish what is what, but I don't think I saw any Evo 1s in the elite fields. I'm sure they were there, I just didn't see them. But this marks the first race that I think we've seen in almost 2 years where there hasn't been an Evo 1 on the podium from an Adidas athlete. So the Evo 2 and the Adios Pro 4. The one that's interesting is the Adios Pro 4. That one saw more spots. That's a shoe that has been very well received. I think it's a great shoe. I've reviewed it very favorably, but it's been a little problematic, and we have seen the elites not really choosing it. They've always been going for the Evo 1 or the Evo 2. So to see the New York City Marathon and the season really wrap up with a lot of Adios Pro 4s on the podium was, I think, really fascinating to see. Now, Adidas is going through a big tech shakeup in 2026. I'll probably have a video somewhere on the channel about what's going on there, but they're moving away from the energy rods. I think they're moving to a totally new foam formula. That's what it seems like from everything I'm hearing and seeing out there. So this is the last time, the last race, we're probably going to see that classic Adidas Rod and Lightstrike Pro shoe formula on their athletes' feet. So in some ways, it's a bit of a goodbye to what they've been doing for the past few years, and I really look forward to what they're doing in 2026. Moving to Nike, from a result standpoint, there's really nothing to talk about, but from a shoe standpoint, there's one story to really talk about, and that's Dev 16141, the Alphafly 4 prototype. Now, both Eliud Kipchoge and Sifan Hassan were wearing this prototype, and both of them, through the interviews that they gave over the weekend, confirmed a few key details. It is confirmed that it is the Alphafly 4 prototype. The form factor of the shoe probably is not what the Alphafly 4 is going to look like, but some of the technology and the geometry of the shoe is. And what both of them said in different ways was there's really three key differences. The shoe is lighter than the Alphafly 3, which is pretty fantastic given how light that shoe was for how much shoe there is actually on your foot. But it's a different foam. Now, looking at this photo of Eliud Kipchoge's feet at the end of the race, it still looks like it's a Pebax foam. It doesn't look like they're moving to an ATPU foam or anything like that, because that looks like Pebax foam. That's classic ZoomX wrinkling that you see. But this foam is supposed to be lighter and more bouncy. I've heard bouncy from a few other sources besides what we heard this weekend. The other big change is the plate. It's supposed to be a new configuration of the plate. Now, I interpret that in two ways. It's got a different geometry. I think a lot like what they did with the Vaporfly 4, how that plate changed, especially in the heel. I think we're going to see that in the Alphafly 4. But I also think it's probably a new layup. It's a little bit lighter. It's a little bit more flexible. That's something I'm hearing as well. And overall, the shoe is lighter and bouncier. It has a different outsole, different type of rubber on there, which again, we've been seeing that for almost 2 years. So this is definitely what we're going to begin to see next spring with the Alphafly 4. Again, it's not going to look like this shoe, but it's going to be quite similar from a technology and a geometry standpoint. So a little bit higher stack, a little bit bouncier, a little bit lighter. Sounds really interesting. Another really interesting thing that I noticed. Here's Eliud Kipchoge's flat lay that he posted on his Instagram the night before the race. Again, I love that these athletes do their flat lays on their hotel beds the night before the race. But there's his Alphaflys at the top, the Dev 16141 shoes that I just talked about. Now, a couple weeks ago at Chicago, Connor Mance also did his flat lay with the same shoe. This was also the Dev 16141 shoe. But there's a detail here that I talked about in my Chicago observation video. I'll put that link in the description if you're interested. But look at the insole. There isn't an insole. And if I put these side by side and I zoom in on Eliud's shoes, you see there's also no insole in that shoe. Now, I've never heard either one of these athletes talk about running in custom insoles or anything like that. So it could definitely be swapped in later. But I'm wondering if they're just running straight on the midsole like that. They'd be very Invincible 1 and 2-esque to be running directly on ZoomX foam. And that would be a big change in how the shoe actually feels. And it could also be how much they're pushing the stack height of this shoe up to that 40 millimeter limit that World Athletics sets. So interesting that both these shoes do not have an insole. Again, it could be slipped in later post this shoe that's put in here, but I don't think so. I think they were actually running on these shoes as is. Again, little interesting detail that I'm sure we'll see much more about in the spring next year. And lastly, I need to mention On and Under Armour together because they sort of go hand in hand in this context to me. Both Obiri and Lokedi are single athletes that make both these brands work. There's really no other athlete that's really making either one of these brands work at this world major level. Now, Obiri in the Cloudboom Strike LS, essentially this is the same shoe that we've been seeing for well over a year now. I think there's been a minor tweak to the upper, and I think they've changed the foam a little bit in this shoe, but it's fundamentally no different than what we've been seeing for some time. And again, Hellen Obiri is really the only one at this world major elite level that makes this shoe work, but frankly, she could make any shoe work. I wouldn't really put it on the shoe for her. And then over to Lokedi with the Under Armour Velociti Elite 3. This shoe just relaunched on October 1st, and I've heard it's a big upgrade from the Velociti Elite 2. But again, Lokedi is the only one who makes this shoe work at this level. And it seems like Obiri and Lokedi are always going toe-to-toe, and it seems like it's often at New York City. So interesting to see these two together, and it was fun to watch these two shoes finish with their finish times together. Overall, congratulations to both On and Under Armour here. So that's the end of the 2025 World Major Marathon season. Again, I always love that it ends in New York City because it's my special race, it's my home race, but it's been a really interesting year. I'll probably talk about some of the themes and some end of year content that you'll see in the next month or so, and I'm really looking forward to what we're going to see in the World Major Marathon racing season next year in 2026. The spring races are not far off, and there should be some really, really fascinating shoes to talk about then. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you want to support what I do here, check out sagasurunning.com for merch or click the join button below. Neither one of those options are good for you. Leave a comment and a like because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.